Was doing drills alongside NATO, or at the same time as NATO. Basically, these are shows of force and stuff like that. So they did a couple of missile tests, I guess, and then their typical drills, armored columns and everything like that. But they do the Navy test every now and then. Russia has about 200 warships, basically mostly submarines. They heavily rely on the submarines for their fleet. The United States has about 60% of its fleet surrounding China right now. So with that going on, the United States is spread very thin. So they've been doing a lot of exercises, to kind of, close to the Russian borders, through Norway and places like that, and then a whole bunch of NATO allies have been basically jumping in on these exercises as well. But like anything, it's getting to the point where it's basically a buildup. To say that this is not a Cold War. I mean, if this kind of buildup, military buildup, was happening 50 years ago or 60 years ago, boy, I mean, everybody would be just completely terrified, especially when you think of the scale of these exercises. In 2010, 2011, Putin told his armed forces and Navy and Air Force and everything that be ready for spontaneous drills at any time. Basically, what you get now is every time NATO has a drill, Russia usually has a counter drill, or when Russia has a drill, NATO has a counter drill, or the U.S. drill, or whatever. And you also see this. It's the same in China as well, where China holds a drill, then Japan holds a drill. Japan holds a drill, then China holds a drill, or they do drills at the same time. It's all displays of force. And this is probably why all the economies in the world are like completely broke. These things are cheap. These warships, especially. They're very, very expensive. Now, here's the irony in all this. When the Soviet Union collapsed, which it never really did, it transferred, the wealth to the oligarchs, kind of like what's happening to the United States now. It's a complete boomerang effect from what happened during the Cold War was to escalate Russia to the point of amassing so much weaponry that it would actually break its own economy and break its own, kill its own economy. It would drain the economy, right? Now, Russia, when they collapsed, they never really did collapse. All they did is divert the money into the military-industrial complex. They made it look like a collapse. The people suffered. Sure, the people suffered. But if you look at the technology that Russia's coming out with today, if they collapsed in the 90s, and you think about it, that's not really that long ago, okay? If they collapsed in the 90s, how are they able to afford state-of-the-art stealth aircraft, all kinds, and mass numbers of this, that, and the other thing? Well, they diverted the wealth like the United States is doing right now. Now, of course, Obama's out there telling everybody, hey, you know what, you got to contribute more to NATO. NATO this, NATO that. Again, Obama's a globalist. I wouldn't even call him a globalist. I don't know what you really classify him as. But he's a front for the globalists and international community this, international community that. He does not care about the United States as a sovereign nation. He thinks of, global citizen type of deal, and which, the United Nations kind of, basically it's communism, and control everything, like, everybody has the same government, everybody has the same dollar, everybody speaks the same language, everybody does everything the same, everybody has the same laws, everybody has the same one world military, one world police force, and everything will be perfect and it will be a utopia. Nothing's been further from the truth, right? There's no such thing as utopia. So these drills go on, and it is starting to really, really spread the United States thin to keep up with what's going on in China, to the point where Japan has come out and said, hey, we're no longer going to have this non-aggressive principle of, not using war to resolve conflict. There's like, maybe we might use war to resolve conflict. And you're hearing the rhetoric from both China and Japan saying, maybe we could have a limited war. I mean, are these people insane? Yes, they are completely insane. And obviously these guys never have to fight, right? So it's always easy to send somebody else's kids to go die in the name of, it's not patriotic at all. But the thing is, it is an arms escalation in a different way where during the Cold War, it was an arms escalation in the sense that, okay, you build this airplane, I build that airplane. You build a MiG-25, we'll build an F-15, and that was the escalation. Now it's a little different. Now it's shows of force escalation because nobody can afford to build half these things that they're building. You know, like the new T-50. I mean, that's an expensive airplane for Russia to be building. You know, I mean, is it cheaper than the F-22? Sure, but it's still expensive for them to build. You know, and not only to build them, but the biggest problem the Russians have is they build tons of stuff, but they usually never have the money to maintain it. And that's how you crush the economy, is they can't afford to maintain it, which is also what's happening to the United States. Now, with that said, even with all the NATO allies, like, I mean, the escalation is really at fever pitch because, yeah, these guys taking part in the drills are not the guys that are nervous, but they're taking parts in drills really close to conflict zones. And we see this, you know, with the U.S. buildup in Jordan, for example. Where, you know, okay, the Syrian border could erupt into a conflict at any moment, so to speak. So that's where they're going to do a drill. Is that really stabilizing the region? Is that really in the best interest of world peace? No, I think not. So they sent a B-2 Sprint, you know, to England a couple of days ago for the making of this video as a show of force, you know, to participate in some more drills, right? And of course the drills kept, you know, it seems like every other week you hear of the largest drill to date. It's the largest drill to date. And then the next week it's even bigger. It's even bigger. Again, to try to crush the economies. I mean, yes, Russia doesn't have the greatest of economies, but they do not have as far to fall as the Americans have, right? So, you know, people are going to start realizing, you know, it's that pay me now, pay me later thing that always comes to bite you back in the butt, where, okay, at some point, okay, the U.S. military is not going to have enough. They're going to have to furlough the military. It's like, okay, yeah, you're stuck in the Baltic Sea right now, too close to Russia. Sorry, but we can't afford to get your ship back, you know, that type of thing. You have all kinds of warships heading in on it. It's not just the States. Everybody's in on it. Canada we're in on it too. We're sending, I forget which ship we were sending, not the Procurer, but it was something else we were sending. Anyway, you know, so NATO is basically alive and well. It has become relevant again over the Ukraine, so to speak. However, it's at a time when nobody can afford to be doing these things. So Poland, as well, is most of these drills are coming out of Poland, and Poland is basically building up the missile shield for Obama. Basically, that agreement that they made can get everybody killed. I have nothing against the Polish. I mean, you know, I have nothing against any of these nations whatsoever. But you know, sometimes you just, oh yes, and just to let you know, not only the Russians but the Americans as well have attack dolphins. You can't even make that up. Yeah, they have the dolphins to go search for anti-ship mines, and also attach explosives to ships and blow them up. Yeah. So this is the level we're at, okay? But Poland is kind of a bit of the epicenter for all this, even though the Ukraine is the catalyst. You know, it's basically Poland has opened its door wide open because they hate the Russians, right? It's kind of one of those things that it's not in the best interest of Poland to be really doing this, because if it makes Russia nervous enough. I mean, the Polish forces, even combined with the American forces that are in Poland, it's not enough to hold back Soviet aggression, if it should turn out to that. Okay, the only way they can hold back the Russians is with nukes. That's it. That's the only way they can hold back the Russians, because even if NATO would win let's say they made an agreement and said, okay, that's it, we're going to denuclearize. All wars from now on are going to be fought with tanks, rifles, and warships and airplanes. Yes, NATO would win over Russia. At what cost? I mean, let's think about it. In World War II, okay, 26 million Russians died in fighting against Nazis. Okay, I think all in, I can't remember if it was 400 million or 600 million people died in World War II. And that's just, but the backbone of people that died weren't soldiers, they were civilians, starving to death. You know, like that's, you know, they destroyed the city, they destroyed the countries, destroyed the means of moving food. You know, it's just devastating. So With that said, again, yes, NATO could take on Russia in a conventional war, but at what cost? At what cost are the bankers really willing to send people to go and die? Because all wars are bankers' wars, right? I mean, all this stuff is funded by banks at some point. When you think about it, all these tanks don't move unless it gets funding. Where does the funding come from? From the taxpayer. That's impossible, okay? Even in the States with a 318 million population, okay, how much tax does everybody pay? There, okay, a CF-18 is $12,000 an hour minimum to run. That's not including ordnance. That's just the insurance and the fuel. That's probably a good estimate of how much it costs. Now run one of those for a week, 10 hours a day. Times that by 50. Again, 318 million people paying how much tax? Well, it's the corporations. Yeah, but the corporations don't pay tax, so it's being financed somehow. Like it's being financed by war is how it's being financed. It gets financed when you take over another country and steal its resources. That's how you finance, the fuel for the, you know what I mean? Not all of it. Yes, sure, some of it is tax, but again, when you have when you're policing the world, there's no way to finance that without collapsing your own economy. It's impossible. That's why I'm all for, nationalism and like Switzerland. Just basically don't get involved. Tragedies happen around the world. Do we really need to be a part of that? Because all it does is it ramps things up rather than, every time Russia sees more NATO troops, showing up, well, it makes them nervous. You know what I mean? So it's an escalation. It never de-escalates. It gets worse. Now, what happens, again, you're in a hot zone to begin with, because there is, you might as well say, a civil war going on in Ukraine, or at least a genocide anyway. Okay, so you have the Ukraine that's basically has turmoil. Okay, you're holding drills within that region. Okay, what happens when the right airplane goes across the wrong, line in the sky, so to speak, and gets shot down? Okay, what I predict is a Ukrainian pilot making a, try to make some sort of a strike on Russian territory. Russia will have to respond. They will have to respond, or tanks get too close to the border, they have to respond. You never know what's going to happen, and you never know who's going to do it. Or you get two warships, like I've always said, when warships are 1,000 miles from each other, from opposing nations, it's still too close. So what happens when we have another Kursk-like incident? Okay, and for those of you who don't know what happened to the Kursk, is basically, it was an Oscar II submarine, okay? The Russians were holding drills alongside China, I believe. At the same time, NATO comes out with a show of force as well to kind of boycott these drills, okay? And there was a French Alouette sub, I guess is what their submarine is. And it was basically shadowing the Oscar II, and it accidentally rammed the submarine, okay? Because what it was doing was basically playing cat and mouse with the Oscar II sub, and somehow the French sub got ahead and slowed down, figuring the sub was in front of it, but it was actually behind it, and the Oscar II rammed into the French submarine, crippling it, putting it broadside to the torpedo doors on the Russian sub. The Russians figure they're getting attacked. Torpedo doors start to open. There's I don't know exactly which U.S. sub was at a 90-degree, basically starboard shot. I believe it was a starboard shot to the Russian sub. They know that the French sub is crippled and at a 90 and can't go anywhere. They hear torpedo doors opening. They have seconds to make the decision. They shoot a Mark 48 torpedo into the Kursk, sinking the Kursk. Now, how did they prove this? Well, right in the Mark 48 torpedoes are basically designed to hit a certain area on the sub. They're programmed to hit in basically the torpedo bay, because it'll blow the snot balls out of any subs if there's any torpedoes in there, right? The idea is to cripple the sub, either hit it in the torpedo bay or hit it in the engines. But however, on a nuclear sub, you don't really want to hit the engines, you know what I mean? Because you're going to hit the reactor, right? So anyway, they hit the sub. There's a big hole, perfectly the same size diameter in the side of the hull of the Kursk when they bring it up. Right away, the Kursk is hauled away to be completely dismantled before really any serious investigation, and it's hidden from the media. Photos came out, and that's what they believed happened. Now, if that would have been warships on the surface, okay, what happens? Okay, that could have led to a thermonuclear exchange back then, and that's when nothing was really going on. Just shows of force. No, the whole globe wasn't tied up in war at the time. Right now, the entire globe is pretty much tied up in war. Name a country outside of Europe and North America that's not in war right now. They're almost all. There's 100 wars going on right now. It's incredible. It's a genocide plan, obviously, but basically China is in Africa making all kinds of trade deals, so that's where all these jihadists are starting to show up. Why? Because if the Anglo-American Union can't have control, nobody can, right? So that's why all these jihadists and everything are showing up. Now look at it in Syria again. Trying to get a war going there. You got four major areas where they're trying to get a war going. But unlike all these other countries, which are relatively easy to destabilize because they're non-superpowers, to refer to Russia as just a regional power is ridiculous. Yes, they are a resource-based economy, and that means that all resource-based economies are fragile because they rely on consumption of resources, right? Okay, fair enough. But they're nuclear. They have the ability to launch missiles anywhere in the world. Okay? And they have several methods of doing it. Submarines, satellites, ballistic missile silos, and mobile missile launchers. So they can do this. They're a superpower, period. Now, with that said, an interesting, one of my subscribers sent me some really interesting facts that I did not know, and this also goes to motive of destabilizing the Ukraine, and to try to steal it away from the Russian influence there. But Ukraine was actually making many parts, about 84% of the parts, I think is what the number I read, of the missile parts for their SS-18 ballistic missile, which the SS-18 is like, they call it Satan. It's a nightmare. One of them devastates the world. 10 of them annihilates planet Earth. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of things about the Ukraine that a lot of people don't know, and myself included, that when it comes out, it's like, hey, there's more motive for them to have done the coup, because right now, Ukraine did a lot of manufacturing for Russia, okay? And I can imagine weapons and stuff would also be done. Again, like anything, you want a car built here for Canada, you get it built in China or Japan. Why? Because it's cheaper, right? It's cheating the system, right? Rather than have the work done in your own country. And even these globalists, like, the reason why I'm not a globalist is because I understand what value is. If you built something in your own country and pay people a decent wage, guess what? They're going to pay more for it. Why? Because they're making a decent wage. And the money stays in your country, and you don't have to print more money than you necessarily have to. Globalism is a really crazy idea because it leads to this kind of stuff. Regime change, destabilization, and drills in areas that are technically conflict zones. Yes, Ukraine is an insolvent country right now. It's insolvent. It can't resolve. These people have to fix it for themselves, but they're having drills and shows of force in an area that can go destabilized in a second. So when they say these are drills, what these really are is they're preparing in case something breaks out. They want the troops there. They want, and we're talking 4,000 troops. You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking just a small drill. A couple hundred guys. We're talking, and when you combine in all the other people that are participating, again, it's dancing with candles around a can of gasoline. You know what I mean? It's lunacy. Now, that said, on the other side, okay, China and Russia, they're not really 100% ready to make that military pact. China doesn't want to do it. They're not really 100% comfortable with trusting anybody else with their military secrets, although they have no problem stealing everybody's secrets. Now, Russia and China do have, they are kind of allies, you might as well say. However, one thing to keep in mind, yes, strategic missiles are pointed from Russia at China and vice versa. In the MAD theory, which most people know what MAD means, but mutually assured destruction, you don't only launch on your enemies, you launch on your enemies' allies as well as your own allies. That's what MAD is. Everybody launches on everybody. Because if you launch all your nukes only on your enemies, well, then let's say Russia launched on the United States and they wiped out the United States and somehow lived through the ordeal. Now they got no nukes left. So how do they defend themselves against Russia should it, you know, that's why they do. It's mutually assured destruction. They've all agreed on doing this. You wipe us out, we'll wipe you out, and that was the major deterrent, that nobody would wipe anybody out, because it's like it's completely nihilistic. It kills everything, and that was the whole point of it. But now you've got these idiots in Washington, and the way these people think, like it's the problem when you have social engineers, okay? Social engineers wants everybody stupid so that they can control people, okay? All I say is stupid people become unpredictable. You can't control them because they're unpredictable. Now the problem is these people that are in Washington don't even know what they don't know. Here they are thinking that they can in 2016, do a preemptive strike, possibly against Russia and China, okay, nuke them, and then when Russia goes to retaliate, use Aegis warships and PACA SM-3 missiles to shoot down all the warheads coming out of Russia. Now, even if they had a 100% success rate of doing this, okay, they would still kill everybody on the planet from all the dirty nuclear fallout. Yes, you shoot down a nuclear weapon, okay, it won't go thermonuclear, but you still have all that plutonium that is burning dirty. It's even worse. You now went from a thermonuclear bomb, which is actually a lot better, believe it or not, although more destructive. It burns cleaner. It burns up all the fuel, okay? But if you have a dirty bomb, you now created an atom bomb, which is completely the opposite. It doesn't blow up as much area, but it irradiates the area to the point that, you'll be peeing green for the next 25,000 years, and then from there you still have about another 10 half-lives, before this, so it's lunacy. And these people think, well, we could do a limited strike here, limited strike there. I mean, what's the point of having nukes if we can't use them? And people like that really need to be punched in the face. Like, they just need, I don't know if it'll do any good, but you might feel better. They really need to be punched in the face. It's like, are you that fucking stupid? Sorry about the language, but, I mean, yes, I guess there's going to be some people riding that nuclear bomb swinging the cowboy hat, but oh my god, are you? And these people say this stuff, you think they're joking, but when you hear one elite say it, and another elite say it, and another elite say it, you start to pick on the fact that they're, it's like, these people ain't all there. They scare me, and that's how they view the world. They're complete, utter psychopaths and idiots at the same time. A really bad combination. So, this idea that they can flirt with superpowers. Other superpowers and completely destabilize one country after another, and then just go after one that actually can fight back. Well, that's just lunacy, And from time to time, I'll get the odd person that will say, "Yeah, but U.S. technology is so much better than Russian technology." So they just don't get the point. Yes, I agree. Russia and China, okay, even if they team together, yes, they could take the United States, okay. Now, if the United States and NATO banded together, yes, they could take Russia and China in a conventional war, non-nuclear. Sure. At what cost? Like how many billions of people died? Not millions, billions. Again, going back to World War II, we're talking, 400 million died? I can't remember the entire number, but probably something like that. I'm sure somebody will put, maybe it was a little higher, maybe it was a little lower. I don't remember. But anyway, millions and millions and millions died, right? And that was with weapons that weren't as precise, okay? Now you have artillery that can, not only put the shell into the area you want to hit, okay, but you can put the shell onto the, let's say it's a building, the guy's on the 7th floor. You can time the shell so that it comes through the roof, goes right down to the 7th floor and blows up. I mean, they can get pretty precise. Now, with drone strikes, for some reason, the Hellfire missiles is really accurate when they're using Apache helicopters to launch it and destroy tanks. It's like 100% kill ratio. But for some reason, when they're doing drone strikes, they hit civilian after civilian. I don't know. I think a lot of it is the training, But the missile technology, it does work, sure. Now, what about shooting down missile interceptors. Well, that's a different story. Why? Because you're shooting a missile. You're shooting a bullet at a bullet in an area you can't see. Okay, outer space. Now, the Russians basically launched that Proton M missile a couple of weeks ago. That satellite missile that had a major malfunction, and the footage that is out there shows something hitting it, and you can't see 100% what it is that hits it. You never know. It could have been just a big piece of space rock. But going by what the magnification of it, and you see the shape, it looks like the warhead from an SM-3 or a joint. Maybe it was that's what the Japanese and the Americans were working on. But it's a space vehicle, not very big, about half the size of a refrigerator, and it basically, okay, has rockets on it, and it can maneuver in space. And in Earth's gravity, they did a test on this thing. It'll actually raise up. They can go left with it. They can go right with it. This thing is pretty precise. However, if it works as advertised, the problem with most of this military equipment, okay, it never works as advertised 100% of the time. Things break down. And when we're talking about nukes, I mean, one's too many, right? Back in Vietnam, they had the most advanced anti-radar aircraft out there was the A6 Intruder, okay? And this thing worked really good, but sometimes you had to just give that radar a little bit of an extra kick to get it to kind of work right, you know. The Skyhawk, or not Skyhawk, yeah, it was Skyhawk, I forget which, anyway, another Vietnam era. The thing where, little McDonnell Douglas Sky Raider, I think it was. Sky Raider or Skyhawk, I can't remember, anyway. You'd fire 20mm cannons off it, and all of a sudden it would put your radar out, okay? The F-16, okay? When it first came out, no problem until you got into a cloud, and the gyro ball would short out some wires. Next thing you know, the pilot would be flying upside down, and a couple of them got killed going into the ground thinking they were flying right side up. And little things like that just kind of throw the reliability pattern into a unpredictable point. It doesn't always work as advertised, even the Russian stuff. Now, the Russian stuff tends to have a better track record because it's lower tech, works no matter what, but they're moving into that realm of ultra high tech as well. But even at that, they have enough missile failures as well. So again, do we really need to be playing around with stuff that... I'm not opposed to the technology. I'm not opposed to having... And I believe in the right for a nation's... I'm a nationalist. Yes, I believe in the arbitrary borders and stuff like that because... not everybody is libertarian-minded, and if we had everybody libertarian-minded, yeah, sure, we wouldn't need borders, we wouldn't need planes, we wouldn't need anything. We wouldn't need bombs, we wouldn't need guns, we wouldn't need anything. But there's the real world, and yeah, you want to protect your borders because you want to know who's coming in and who's going out. But most importantly, you want to make sure you know who's flying over them. And if people are flying over them with things that you don't want them to fly over them with, bombers, i.e., that type of thing, well, then you're going to need to have a means of protecting yourself. That's fine. But that said, just worry about your borders, not everybody else's. And that's the problem we have, is the NATO overreach, the UN overreach, the United States overreach, and foreign policy is what is killing Americans right now, because that's what bankrupt the country, is the foreign policy. In history, every empire that's ever failed always fails when its military gets too big. And there's a saying that you can judge the wealth of a country by the size of its navy. And by the size of its navy, you can kind of predict how long it's going to be before it collapses. The typical run is an 80-year run per empire, right? That said, the United States has had a pretty good run, but if you really look at that 80-year model, just look at when they really industrialized the military complex, starting kind of in World War I, which was the most unique war in history until now. You know what I mean? Like it changed warfare forever. And then World War II came along, and ever since those times, the military's just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and black budgets and all that, and it's ridiculous. Beyond ridiculous. Again, people want state-of-the-art technology to defend their borders, but at some point, 2 + 2 will not make 5. It's a pay me now, pay me later system. And the pay me later is basically breaks the country, and then everybody's going to hurt really bad. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that, just to keep you guys going, or in the know of what's going on. plus all the economic stuff that's going on between Russia and China. They're even working on another trade deal. Uh, but yeah, the buildup is just at fever pitch right now. Who knows what'll happen? I'll tell people is put food away, be prepared for anything. So anyway, rate, subscribe, share, comment, and like. G'day, hi, and welcome. Well, it looks like Russia's doing drills alongside NATO, or at the same time as NATO. Basically, these are shows of force and stuff like that. So they did a couple of missile tests, I guess, and then their typical drills, armored columns and everything like that. But they do the Navy test every now and then. Russia has about 200 warships, basically mostly submarines. They heavily rely on the submarines for their fleet. The United States has about 60% of its fleet surrounding China right now. So with that going on, the United States is spread very thin. So they've been doing a lot of exercises, to kind of, close to the Russian borders, through Norway and places like that. And then a whole bunch of NATO allies have been basically jumping in on these exercises as well. But like anything, it's getting to the point where it's basically a buildup. To say that this is not a Cold War. I mean, if this kind of buildup, military buildup, was happening 50 years ago or 60 years ago, boy, I mean, everybody would be just completely terrified, especially when you think of the scale of these exercises. In 2010, 2011, Putin told his armed forces and Navy and Air Force and everything that be ready for spontaneous drills at any time. Basically, what you get now is every time NATO has a drill, Russia usually has a counter drill. Or when Russia has a drill, NATO has a counter drill, or the U.S. drill, or whatever. And you also see this, it's the same in China as well, where, China holds a drill, then Japan holds a drill. Japan holds a drill, then China holds a drill. Or they do drills at the same time. It's all displays of force. And this is probably why all the economies in the world are, like, completely broke. These things are cheap, these warships especially. They're very, very expensive. Now, here's the irony in all this. When the Soviet Union collapsed, which it never really did, it transferred, the wealth to the oligarchs, kind of like what's happening to the United States now. It's a complete boomerang effect from what happened during the Cold War was to escalate Russia to the point of amassing so much weaponry that it would actually break its own economy and break its own, kill its own economy. It would drain the economy, right? Now, Russia, when they collapsed, they never really did collapse. All they did is divert the money into the military-industrial complex. They made it look like a collapse. The people suffered. Sure, the people suffered. But if you look at the technology that Russia's coming out with today, if they collapsed in the 90s, and you think about it, that's not really that long ago, okay? If they collapsed in the 90s, how are they able to afford state-of-the-art stealth aircraft, all kinds, and mass numbers of this, that, and the other thing? Well, they diverted the wealth like the United States is doing right now. Now, of course, Obama's out there telling everybody, hey, you know what, you got to contribute more to NATO. NATO this, NATO that. Again, Obama's a globalist. I wouldn't even call him a globalist. I don't know what you really classify him as. But he's a front for the globalists and international community this, international community that. He does not care about the United States as a sovereign nation. He thinks of, global citizen type of deal, and which, the United Nations kind of, basically it's communism, and control everything, like, everybody has the same government, everybody has the same dollar, everybody speaks the same language, everybody does everything the same, everybody has the same laws, everybody has the same one world military, one world police force, and everything will be perfect and it will be a utopia. Nothing's been further from the truth, right? There's no such thing as utopia. So these drills go on, and it is starting to really, really spread the United States thin to keep up with what's going on in China, to the point where Japan has come out and said, hey, we're no longer going to have this non-aggressive principle of, not using war to resolve conflict. There's like, maybe we might use war to